Time now to take another delve into the morning papers. Here with me to review them are the UK editor of The Big Issue, Paul McNamee, and the broadcaster and journalist, Vidisha Mamata. So welcome back to both of you. We're going to dive into The Guardian next, Vidisha, aren't we? Because much has been made of Labour's attack ads. I think there's more than one now. On Twitter, and they've had a bit of a backlash. So talk us through this story and how The Guardian treats it.
Yes, lots of division within Labour ranks because they have released a series of really hard-hitting, personally directed attack ads against the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as we slowly crank up our gears towards another election in possibly earlier spring 2024. These adverts feature Rishi Sunak's face in close-up, and they say things like, do you believe in sending violent, convicted child abusers to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. And now, of course, there's lots of division within Labour themselves because, of course, this comes from their strategic comms unit or whatever the new Labour term for that would be. And yet frontbenchers are saying this is poisonous, this drags down debate, this involves personal attacks which are clearly libelous. They are not true. I don't think anyone at any point of the political spectrum believes that Rishi Sunak thinks that you shouldn't send a convicted child abuser to prison. And that they also accuse Rishi Sunak of being responsible for all of the ills and spills of the last 13 years of Tory government. It's something that people across the entire political spectrum have protested because it seems to say, well, it's okay that if you're the leader of any kind of party, instead of leading with your own policies, instead of offering voters an option to use their minds and their intellects to choose the best government for the future, you simply personally attack the leader of the opposing party, when in fact Rishi Sunak was a very capable COVID chancellor. I don't think anyone in any party could have done better. And he's only been in power for barely 2 years, so you can't roll out statistics regarding the failures of the criminal justice system or underinvestment in all of these very big block elements of UK life, healthcare, childcare, infrastructure, and then pin them on one person. And it gives the other side license to do the same thing. So I think lots of people at all sides are concerned by what this says about what is permissible when you're leading up to a public vote.
Yes, and yes, the Labour Party comms people clearly think that something about the ads working because they have launched another one despite that criticism. Let's go to the Times, shall we, Paul, next, because this is a story that Vidisha touched on in the last hour, but I could tell you were itching to say something about it. And so let's discuss this. Housing targets scrapped, says the headline there. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things to it. As Daisy said, in the story, it mentions the 300,000 house building target that it says that Michael Gove is going to have to get rid of now. That target has not been there for some time. The idea that the Tories, it was a manifesto promise, are building 300,000 homes a year is nonsense. They've never got near that target. So it's slight misdirection in terms of what is happening in home building and house building in Britain. Also, it allows the government off the hook because it passes the responsibility onto local authorities. It feeds into the idea that everything is okay for Tory MPs until it's in their backyard, and then they don't like it, the same as with refugee rehousing. But the key point of this is that there are just not enough new homes being built in Britain as a whole, not just in England. And the government policy is not strong enough and robust enough. It needs to have some kind of an emergency approach in the way it had in the post-war, because otherwise people are not going to be able to afford homes. Young people are not going to be able to move out of their own particular parental home. That's if they're lucky enough to be able to still be there. Rents are going to keep rising and they're going to spiral. The Renters Reform Bill is supposed to be going through this sitting of Parliament, and it looks like it's going to be kicked into October. It may help some. Gove certainly is somebody who's making the right noises. He's helped with the cladding crisis, but I'm surprised that this story hasn't been picked up further. It is a fundamental problem in Britain at the moment around house building.
And very briefly, Paul, you talked about MPs not wanting new houses in their own backyard. Isn't that the case with a lot of members of the public? They all agree that, many people would agree that more housing is needed, but nobody wants them built right on their doorstep.
Well, potentially, although, I mean, that everyone, I think, has a responsibility to make sure that this is understood not to be a bad thing. Just because some new houses are coming to a local area, it doesn't mean that that is going to be a bad thing for a local area. And I think that MPs particularly need to be strong and say that this is good for you, this is good for your family. This means that services can be provided because people can afford homes, which is ultimately good for you or good for your children.
Okay, let's move on to the Mail next. Bidisha, they are reflecting on the junior doctor strike next week.
Yes, we're very much in an age of strikes across the board, but the one that concerns the public the most for obvious reasons is the breakdown of the, quoted here, utterly overwhelmed NHS. So coming up to next week, we've got nearly 50,000 junior doctors going on strike. They're agitating for increased pay of 35% and also better conditions. And frankly, I think there's an underlying desire that all of the goodwill that the public and public figures seem to express towards the NHS and its medics and its experts and all of the people who work in this vast system, which we're rightly so proud of, should be translated into tangibles, because exactly the same medics that we all love so much, if they're being underpaid and overworked, they're subject to exactly the same pressures that we are all facing. The cost of living crisis, cost of housing, cost of wages, inflation, everything else. However, people have warned that this is going to scupper so many plans for example, cancer appointments and treatment.
We're out of time. I'm sorry, Bidisha, but we will see you both in the next hour. For the moment, though, thanks both.